Hey everybody, Brian King here. Welcome to another episode of Resilience Warriors. Why did I name it that? Because so many of us deal with our own challenges and struggles every day, and it can feel like a war at times inside ourselves. And myself, I'm up against ADHD, dyslexia, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and multiple sclerosis. And what I look at those are as my four teachers. They are my daily opportunities to be resourceful and find new solutions. And some days it's a real battle. But in the end, I become stronger and more resilient, hence the name of the show. And what I like to bring to you with each episode are people who are accessing life in a very empowered way and finding creative ways of approaching problems and bringing those solutions to you. And today, I have the privilege of Leslie Walker-Hirsch joining us. I met her on LinkedIn, which ironically I'd sworn off of about a year ago, and just recently got back on. And lo and behold, there was Leslie. And she has a very fascinating niche that really speaks to the disabilities community that I work with. And what Leslie deals with is the topic of sexuality, intimacy for people in the disabilities sphere. And I really wanted to hear her thoughts on it and have her bring some of those thoughts to you. And the paradigm she shared with me in a recent conversation was fascinating and one I hadn't heard before. So I'm very excited to learn more from her in this episode and have her bring it to you. So Leslie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us.
Brian, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm so glad you found me, and I'm so glad I found you as well.
It's serendipity. That's all I got to say about it. So give us a little bit about your story. How did you get into the work that you're doing?
Well, becoming a sexuality consultant and educator for people with intellectual disabilities is not the kind of thing you say to your parents. Hey, Mom, hi, Dad, you know what I want to be when I grow up? I think I'll be a sex educator. I think they would all faint if you said that. It's the kind of thing that you feel and have an experience with a group of people who need your services, and then you go look for them and they aren't there. So you say, somebody needs to invent something to help people with their sexuality, and then it turns out that it's you, and that's always a big surprise. So when I was working as an administrator for a community residence program in Rhode Island, the teeny tiny state of Rhode Island, some people that were associated with our program who had an intellectual disability and who had been liberated from the LAD Center, which was the state institution for people with intellectual disabilities called mental retardation at that time. So people got into trouble by living out in the community and making mistakes, not because they were evil or bad, but because they had not learned how to behave and what was expected of them in the community. And so I said, somebody really ought to do something about it. And so the boss said, well, why don't you hire somebody to do that? So I spent the next couple of weeks tapping away on my phone, trying to get somebody to run a sex education program for 8 mildly mentally handicapped adults who had been liberated from the institution. And after 2.5 weeks, I could not find a single person to do that. And so the boss said, well, this was your idea, so why don't you do it? And so I used that, at that time, now we're talking about 1978, I used the high-tech era computer searches back then, and I got a stack of articles this big, did all my research in about 5 minutes, and said, clearly nobody knows what to do. And so I said, well, I don't know what to do either. My research didn't yield very much, but I was able to meet a person who was a nurse and a social worker, and I was a special educator and an administrator, and I figured between the two of us, we knew everything that there was to know. I was a little bit mistaken about that, but we started a sex education program thinking that we could cover everything in 12 sessions of 1 hour each, and that was not exactly accurate. It's way more, it's a lifetime of learning, not only for me, but for the people that we serve with intellectual limitations, but actually for everybody else. And so we proceeded with our little program of 12 sessions, and really people fell asleep for most of it. It was so boring. I said, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And so we met a woman who had a daughter with an intellectual disability, and she used to teach her daughter that if people would come running over to her to hug her, that if the daughter would put her hand out to shake, and then if she spun around, that nobody would get any closer to her than that. And so we said, maybe we can use this to help people. And so we said, if we looked at social distance and social boundaries in terms of distance, and use some of the special education techniques that I had learned, and some of the social worker techniques that my writing partner, Marklin, had learned, that we could make something that would help people to understand the social paradigm and the social boundaries associated with touch, talk, and trust when they were out and about, out of the institution and in included community settings. And so that's what we did. And so that's how I got involved in this.
So necessity was the mother of invention.
Well said.
You saw the need, and there was nobody out there doing it. There was this huge service gap. And because it needed to be done, you did it. You had scraps to begin with from what was out there in the literature. You and your friend got together and synergized, which is one of the best ways of creating new knowledge. And you tested it. See how people responded. And my guess is you've been refining it over the years. And
we have.
This program that you shared with me, the Circles program, did you have a say in creating that, or was it somebody else's that you integrated? How did that all come about?
Well, it was this woman who taught her daughter about putting out her hand. And we said, well, you know, if we could make a real life version of what the social paradigm looked like, and I just happened to have something that somebody made for me. This is a picture of all of your different kinds of relationships that you have. And we created a life-size floor mat, a set of that looked a lot like that. Of course, nowadays we produce it in a very formal way for people to actually stand on and do role playing. So it's the circles concept is really simple. It says you are the center of all of your circles. And that's the place where all of the power is. You have the power to decide who will be close to you and who will stay away from you. In the center is just you. The circle is small enough that there's only room for you. Your body is your own, and you can decide how close other people come to you. The next circle around that, and we color-coded it purple, because most people, even with extreme disabilities, know their colors pretty early on. So we color-coded that purple because, you know, that's the color for royalty, and you deserve to be treated like a king or a queen. At least that's what my mother told me.
Very clever.
And so around that purple circle, and in addition, we also added a lot of different communication strategies. We have the physical act of being there, which is quite empowering. We have the color purple. We have a sign. I don't know if you can see it here. This is the sign for the private purple circle. So we gave it a name, we gave it a color, we gave it a sign, we gave it a geography. And we said, when you stand on this, you have this around you all the time, even if you can't see it. It's always there. Around that purple circle was another circle. We called it the hug circle. We color-coded it blue. We gave it a sign that looks a lot like a hug. I'm told by my speech and language friends that this is called an iconic sign because it looks like what it is. So in that circle are the people who come very close to you. For most people, it's their moms, their dads, brothers and sisters, maybe their dog or their cat, maybe their goldfish if they can get their arms around the bowl. And as adults, sometimes people wish to have a sweetheart that is that close to you. A sweetheart is someone who's not in your family, and I want to underline that. A sweetheart is a person who you have a romantic attachment to or romantic feelings for. And not everyone has a sweetheart, and not everybody wants a sweetheart. But if you do, then maybe someday you will achieve the status of being someone's sweetheart and having someone as your sweetheart. Now, the circle is a very interesting shape because it starts out very small with just room for you. And when you put another circle around it, there's room for more people in it. So your mom, your dad, your sister Sue, and your brother Joe might also fit in there. Of course, if it's a step parent or a foster parent, they may fit in there also. They're your family. You have the kind of close touching with them that's not romantic, but that shows the sign of your closeness and your affection. And so there's room for a few more people or animals in that. Around that circle and a little further away, you have the green, far away, friendly hug circle, which is a hug, but that's not a body-to-body hug. There's a space that blue indicates. So if you're standing on this mat here, and I'll show this to you. If you're standing over here in the purple and someone is in the green circle, you have a boundary in between the two of you that you don't want to breach. So the kind of touch is a far away hug. That's not a body-to-body hug. And it's the kind of talk you do with that person. You may talk about your personal experiences. These are people you know and that you have some degree of experience and trust with. It's usually your friends, your close friends, and your extended family, aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas. And all of that works very nicely. So you have touch, talk, and trust. And then the next circle, further away than the green, is the yellow circle. And when you're standing on that mat, you'll find the yellow circle is a handshake distance away. And those are people who are acquaintances. Now, acquaintances and friends are not the same. In the olden days, either I wanted to marry you or you were a stranger, but we've had to help people to understand there are different gradations of intimacy and closeness. And none is better than another. They are just different from each other. So Brian, now that I know you and I know your name and I recognize your face and you know my name and recognize my face, I might put you in my green far away circle because if we know each other better. But if we just know each other to the degree that we know each other now, I might put you in the yellow handshake circle. And if we met in person, not electronically, we might shake hands and we might have small talk together, or we might find we are colleagues together and have collegial talk about disability, about sexuality and disability. But I wouldn't answer any personal questions and we wouldn't touch each other beyond a handshake. Maybe someday we'd become friends and have a closer relationship at that time. So, and the yellow handshake circle is getting bigger and bigger geometrically. And so there are lots of people who we have as acquaintances whose names we know and who know our name that we talk to at parties, we talk to at meetings, and we have things in common with that we've had experiences together. But we don't love them yet. We might someday, but not yet. We have to know them better. So around that yellow circle that has lots of room, there's another circle. We call it the orange wave circle. And it's a circle for people who you don't know their names. Maybe their faces are familiar. Maybe they're your neighbors and you ride up and down in the elevator with them, but you don't really know them. So you don't touch them, and they don't touch you, but you can acknowledge them by waving, smiling, making eye contact. And maybe someday you'll know them better, but maybe not. And so there's one more space around all of those circles, and that's the red stranger space. And we make it with a little wiggly line, as you can see. I don't know if you can see it that well, but it's got a little wiggly line. And the truth is that most of the people in the world are strangers. You don't know them, they don't know you. You don't touch them, they don't touch you, don't talk to them, and they don't talk to you unless they are strangers that are designated as community helpers, people who wear a specialized uniform, people who do a job that you recognize, like the plumber. And so when the plumber comes to your home, if your mom and your dad are there, you might let him in. You know he's coming to fix the sink. And so what you talk about with him, the touch you have with him is none, because you don't have business touch with the plumber. The kind of talking you might do with the plumber, well, you talk about plumbing. Yes, this is the sink that's stopped up. Please fix my sink. If the plumber wants to talk about something more personal than that, you have to say, that's none of your business. And the kind of trust you have is trusting that person about their job, business trust. If the plumber wants to give you advice about how you should wear your hair or where you should shop for groceries, he doesn't know about that. Why would you trust him about that? You trust him about plumbing. And that's how people help us that are community helpers. The rest of the world that are strangers we don't interact with. Most of the time, they stay strangers. And so that's the circles concept in very brief. It applies easily to in-person interactions, but it's also a framework for learning about many subjects associated with sexuality. So for example, if you say, I have a boyfriend or a man friend, a romantic partner, and I want to marry him, and we're planning to get married, and we're going to have a wedding. Well, how should I decide who to invite to the wedding? Let me look at the circles diagram and say, well, I want my close family members there, that's for sure, in the blue circle. I want my friends from the green circle there. You know, we have to limit the numbers, so I think acquaintances are not going to be invited, and certainly strangers won't be there. Also, I neglected to say that in that orange wave circle, another group of people that we put in there, aside from people whose faces we recognize, are children. We tell people it's best to wave to children unless they have another designation that their parents have approved of. So many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have been victims of the mythology, the false perceptions and prejudices that surround that disability. And so when they talk with a child or attempt to touch a child out of friendliness or affection, sometimes that touch is misconstrued as being inappropriate. And so we really warn people it's best to wave to children unless their parents say it's okay to have a different kind of touch. And so that's the social paradigm that we all operate under. Now, my close family members are not the same as yours, and your friends are not the same as mine. So when I work with people to teach them this concept, we have a placemat size blank set of that circles paradigm. It doesn't have any colors and it doesn't have any names in it, but we help people to listen to the video stories and to develop a graph of their own set of circles. Who is in your circle? So while I would put Brian in my acquaintance circle at this point, I hope you would put me in your yellow handshake circle too, Brian. Your audience members that are listening, well, I don't know them, and maybe they know a little bit about me, and maybe I will get to know a little bit about them if anyone chooses to contact me and learn more about circles. So now I've exhausted my circles talk for the moment. What else do you want to know about?
Well, first I want to say it's absolutely brilliant in its simplicity. You know,
Well,
and its concrete nature is what is most exciting about it, because it makes it so accessible to people that are challenged with understanding the abstract concepts of the social paradigm. Because I've had conversations over the years with people, and there's all these rules and all these situations, and having to read the nonverbal cues and understand the unwritten rules. And that's just garbage. You can't really operate with that. But when we talk about something as you do, that you have these very firm boundaries, there are criteria for who get to be in there, and it's flexible. There are people that can make certain decisions that warrant pushing them further away from you. And knowing what those boundary violations are, and knowing because you are the center of those circles and you hold the power to determine who gets to be a certain distance, that can be very empowering.
Yes, it is.
You can tell somebody to move further away from you.
So if somebody tries to what we call circle jump, in other words, if everybody starts out as a stranger, what is the process of moving from being a stranger way out there in the red stranger space to becoming either an acquaintance or perhaps a friend or perhaps even a romantic partner? What's the process? So the circles number one, part one, talks about laying out who's in which circle. But there's a part two to that that says, okay, we were strangers a month ago. Now you're in my yellow handshake circle. How did you get there? Well, we talked on the phone. We got to know each other. I checked you out, of course, and you checked me out too. And so we knew a little bit about each other. So we said we could have a professional friendship. Maybe someday we'll work on a long-term project together and we will get to know each other and say, hey, how about having a cup of coffee after we work on this? And maybe we'll go out for coffee and I'll find out that you like some of the same things that I like, and maybe we know some of the same people, and we will have changed our relationship from being colleagues to becoming friends. Not everybody becomes a friend, and not everybody stays a stranger either. So circles part two, level one, part two, has to do with what's the process of getting to know someone and what are the social skills involved in making that progress, and how do you decide when to say, that's close enough. I don't really want you as a friend, but I'm happy to say hello to you in the hallway if we meet, and so on. So it's not a quick fix, but it is a long time way of helping people to manage to be independent in the world. You know, right now there's a big push, and rightly so, for people to have independent paying jobs in the community. Well, you know, parents all want that for their kids if their kids can manage it. You are not safe in the community at your job, as we're seeing in the news today, my goodness, at your job, on the bus, in the taxi cab, unless you recognize when somebody is encroaching upon you in an inappropriate way. And to learn to either say, stop, we don't have that kind of relationship, or if you can't do that, and sometimes the situation is such that saying stop doesn't do you much good, but certainly to be able to tell somebody and to have the language to say, this is what happened to me and I don't want it to happen again. We have, circles is in its fifth iteration. So there's the initial circles, then there's one called Stop Abuse, which is really an assertiveness training program to help people to recognize and defend their social boundaries in an appropriate way, and to learn to tell someone what has happened to them. Was another one which we have actually is out of print now, that was about preventing HIV transmission and communicable diseases. But since the landscape had changed so much, we took it off the market because some of the information had become outdated after 12 years. And so in recent times, since people start using the Circles program very often when they're in 5th and 6th grade, or that age group, we found that by the time they're in high school, they want something else. They're ready for something else. And so we developed a level 2 program, which deals with some of the more gray areas in relationships. You know, we know that relationships don't have a bright line in between them. And so there are gray areas that have to be negotiated. Not everybody has the ability to do that because of their intellectual impairment, but certainly they can use circles as a tool. And the level 2 deals with some of the more subtle aspects of relationships, and the backup skills and activities are a little more academic, like keeping a journal, et cetera, et cetera. So circles is actually, each set is between 6 and 12 live action video stories that people watch, and from watching the stories, they develop their personal set of circles and then can practice role play on the life-size circle map, and then hopefully be able to carry that out in any setting that they're in. hopefully parents get to know about circles as well and can support those concepts at home and have that be required behavior, not only for the person who has a disability, but for the other family members as well. And I'm happy to say that recently, about a year ago, we moved into the 21st century and have developed the Circles app. And that's very exciting. It's an interactive iPad app that's available at I think it's circlesapp.com, or it's available on the apps at the App Store, etc. And it's a way, the focus of that is to support the Circles curriculum, which is, it may be a 6-month to several year project. But the app can be done at home one-to-one, and you can make your own circles graph electronically by choosing photos that are already loaded into your iPad or developing icons that depict the characteristic of somebody that you want to put in your circles, and you actually create and then can print that circle graph that you've developed. So I'm very excited about that, and it's been very well received, easy to use, and actually fun to do.
One thing my head is just overflowing with the implications of what you're doing. Because as you mentioned a little bit earlier, at this time, there is an outpouring of women who are sharing their stories of being sexually harassed, sexually assaulted by men in power. And when I think about the stories I've heard over the years about women with Asperger's or other challenges that were assaulted by men because they simply couldn't read the signs that they were in danger, but now hearing these outpouring of stories, it's not just women with social or mental disabilities, it's women in general that are being put in these situations and being violated. And I'm thinking about how this could be taught in a school setting to boys and girls of all ages, so the boys learn you don't do this stuff.
You're very perceptive, Brian. We are hoping and expecting that the Circles app in particular will be used by family members, whether they're children or the cousins or the grandpa, whether they have a disability or not. And so when I talk with people about using the Circle app as a family member, I say, well, you can make one for your child who has a disability, but make one for yourself, for the father, for the brother, and let everybody compare them and make it a family fun night. It doesn't have to be punishing. It's a very lively and fun way to learn. And so people are doing that, and I hope it's going to take off to kids. I've used it with some of my grandchildren let me think how old they were at the time. I think one was 11 and one was 13. And they liked doing it very well. It wasn't hard for them, and it wasn't, quote, dumbed down. It's just what you bring to bear to it, and to understand what the limits that you can set in relationships, that you have the power.
One thing that's really important and can be part of the family activity is, and I've seen this in my own family and had to really make an issue of it, is certain family members that think they have an unlimited right to physical contact. The aunt or the grandparent that says, oh, come on, you give me a hug because I asked you for one. And I had to call out my own mother on this because she tried using guilt to get what she wanted. My boys had Asperger's, and they had issues with touch sensitivity or just anxiety. And in one instance, she said to my youngest, come give grandma a hug. And he said, no, I don't want a hug. And she says, oh, you're going to make grandma sad. And I said to her, right in front of him, don't you ever do that again. I said, it's his body, it's his boundary. You do not have a right to it simply because you want it. He has a right to say no to you. I don't want you to ever say that to him again. And thank goodness she got the point.
Well, when you talk about sexual encroachment and sexual abuse, the statistics are alarmingly horrible. People with intellectual and other disabilities are between 6 and 10 times more likely to suffer sexual abuse than their same age, same sex peers. Now that's quite alarming when you think about it. And when you think about all these women who are coming forward, and men too, I don't want to say this is limited to women, and the belief is too that men and boys are much less likely to report abuse because of the shame involved in it. But we know that it's rampant, and sometimes people say, oh, well, you shouldn't wear a dingle-dangle earring, you shouldn't act in a provocative way. Sexual abuse is not about romance or love or even physical attraction. It's about power. And when somebody sees a person who they think will be a good victim, a mean person is ready to jump right in and do as they wish. So when they see a person who has physical characteristics that would deem them as good victims, well, that person doesn't speak very clearly. Nobody will believe them if they report me. Or that person doesn't have language skills that can describe what happened to them. Or that person probably doesn't know the difference between dancing and being groped. Those are the people who are most likely to be victimized and selected as victims. I publish a newsletter, and I know you're on my list now because I checked. Every quarter when I send out my newsletter, I put in a picture of someone who has been convicted of some kind of sexual abuse. This is what an abuser looks like. Some of them are women, some of them are men, some of them are old, some of them are young, and you just don't know. Anyone can be an abuser if they have that in their heart to do it. And the only way to help people to be less vulnerable is to give them information and education that will serve them well to recognize and report abuse, and for people out there to know that those with disabilities are not ignorant. They have been taught, they know the difference. Being a sex educator for people with intellectual disabilities, I have a master's degree in special education and administration. So I'm very skilled at knowing what kind of teaching strategies will help people learn. Because, when sexual abuse goes on, mom is not likely to be there, the policeman's not likely to be there, your protector, whoever that might be, is not likely to be present. You have to have this inside you at all times. And so when someone is vulnerable, and when they are believed to be vulnerable, and they are often vulnerable, we need to provide sex education. In schools today, many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are in inclusive settings, which is wonderful in many, many, many ways, and I fully support that. However, when it comes to sex education, that is mostly taught in the health class. So kids are included in the health education class. They learn about sexuality, and the class is geared not to their rate of learning, not to their style of learning, not to their idiosyncratic learning differences, but to the general class. So a lot of it goes too fast, uses language they don't understand, whoops, right over their heads, and they don't get it. I had a mother bring her daughter to me who had said, "Mother, I'm never going to school again." And her mother said, "I don't," and so the daughter refused to go to school. When I uncovered and got to know this young woman with Down syndrome, I got to find out what the problem was. Well, she was mainstreamed and included in the health class, and she learned that teenagers drink liquor, do drugs, and have sex, and that's too dangerous. She doesn't want to be with them. So what she got out of that whole health class was not what the teacher intended. And you can't blame the health teacher, because the health teacher may know a lot about sex and about sexuality, but doesn't know a whole lot about teaching strategies that address the learning needs of people who need special educational strategies. So you go to the special ed teacher, and special ed teachers are very good at developing strategies and ways of teaching people who have unusual learning styles or have some of their learning channels blocked in some way. But they never thought they were going to have to say all those sex words. And so they don't even know if they're allowed to say those sex words. And so they don't want to teach the sex part. And the health teachers can't teach the special ed part. And so what happens? Kids fall through the crack between the health teacher and the biology teacher. And they don't always get the sex education they need. And parents are reluctant to provide a full sex education to their children, whether they have a disability or not. It's hard to talk about some of those subjects unless you're used to doing it, especially with family members. Parents are afraid that they will have to disclose some of their own private preferences, and that's certainly not appropriate necessarily with a young person with an intellectual disability. And so they want some help with this, but they don't know where to get it. Some schools are providing this, and Circles is used in probably more than 10,000 different schools and adult programs for people with intellectual disabilities, but not in every part of the country. Some school districts refuse to do sex education. They say, just say no. That's really not sufficient for most of us. And it's certainly not enough for people with intellectual disabilities.
Just to reiterate something you mentioned is parents that don't know how to have this conversation typically won't. And they don't realize what a disservice they do their kids by sending them out into the world completely naive and unequipped to deal with those situations. And from what I've heard you describe about the Circles program, it gives the parents a model to safely introduce these topics and address it, because you can hit all of those different points of intimacy, whether it be a complete stranger or someone that becomes a sweetheart, as you put it. Because one thing that is undeniable is all of our kids are going to hit puberty at some point. And they're going to have these urges, and they may have some impulse issues depending on their level of disability. Or they might have some very healthy attraction to a peer. And they need some tools for not only understanding this, but acting upon it.
Parents can very easily ignore sex education, at least until their children reach puberty, and then they can no longer ignore it. And, in my opinion, and many other parents and sex educators share my opinion, it's better to prevent a problem than to correct it. So by not providing information before you have a problem, you're creating the opportunity for a problem to happen. It's better to walk around a pothole that you see instead of walking into it and figuring out how to get out of it. So, parents are able to ignore this, and it's been my experience too that often when people see somebody who has a disability and they're aware of that disability, they don't see the man or the woman or the boy or the girl. They see the disability and they forget it's a person. And that person has the same drives and feelings and hopes and dreams, and has experiences and an inner life that you don't know about. Everyone has a story, and you don't know what that story is. So you want to make it be a good story. And education is what you have. Sometimes people think, well, I'll just insulate my child from the world. I won't let my child be alone for a minute. I won't let them touch any parts of their body. I'll prevent them from having knowledge about their own sexuality, etc. It doesn't work. You can't drum it out of someone. I think that was tried way back in the eugenics era with all the institutions. People are in the community. They're out and about. They want what you want. They want closeness. People are more vulnerable if they do not have a group of friendships and other kinds of relationships to support them. Unless they feel safe telling their parents about some abuse that has happened to them, they won't have anyone to tell. There is a safe person in every environment that somebody can report that to. In some cases, a parent is too threatening because anytime sex has been brought up, mother or dad says, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that here. But you must talk about it because you care about your child. You want your child to have a rich life. You want your child to be safe. You want your child to be interactive and out and about in the community, enjoying the fruits of the community just the way you do.
One
It's
thing
a tough
one thing I emphasize with all parents and professionals is the first thing to consider when educating a child isn't whether they're disabled or not. The first thing to consider is the fact that their humanity must come first. If you can see that first, everything else is a detail that you take into consideration as part of the child's context. But first, they're a human being with human needs that need to be met, or they can't live a full life. And everything that we've discussed today acknowledges that, their essential humanity, and it's so wonderful. Now, I know that people, because you're in the digital age, people can access this program online and get it for themselves, yes?
The Circles program, the app they can access online. If they have an iPad, I think just an iPad. It's going to be coming out for the Android very soon, but it isn't available at this time. The Circles curriculum is multimedia. It comes with the circle mat, the life-size set of circles, 12 videos, the placemat size sets of circles for people to color and develop as individual depictions of the relationships that they have, and can always be used as a rehearsal strategy. So for example, if I had someone here who had their circles graphic, and a lot of people spend a lot of time developing this, and they keep it and they treasure it. They put it up on their bulletin board in their bedrooms or in their family room. So we're going to the supermarket today, Brian. Let's see who we're going to see at the supermarket. Well, you're going to be there, so you're in the purple circle, and I'm going to be there, and I'm your mom, and I'm in the blue circle, and we're going to be there. We're going to be holding hands and walking together through the aisles. Who else is going to be there? Well, there's the lady who stands behind the cash register. She's going to be there. What circle should we put her in? Oh, we'll make her a community helper because she's helping us out to check our groceries out. So what kind of touch are we likely to have with the cashier at the supermarket? The answer is none. And what kind of talking are we likely to do with the person in the supermarket? Well, we might talk about how much the groceries cost, or what's on sale today, or that you're very happy because you're buying lots of vegetables today, and that you like your vegetables and your fruit. And what kind of trust are we going to have with the person in the supermarket? Well, I'm going to trust that she doesn't bring up anything that's not on my list here or not in my cart, that she knows that I'm going to pay for all of it. I'm going to trust her to give me the right change, etc. And then I can say, so long, I'm glad you're a community helper, and then I'm going to leave the supermarket. So you just had a little rehearsal strategy of community behavior, not that you're requiring the child to have, but that the child decided for themselves. They put the grocery clerk in the red circle, not you. They decided. Now, there was an instance, and I think that's a very important point, that this takes away the oppositionalness that sometimes happens when a parent wags their finger and tells their child what to do. Let's see what you decided. You decided that this is the kind of touch, talk, and trust to have. You put that person in that circle, not me. So that's what you decided. And so it's an empowerment thing, and it takes away that oppositional interaction that sometimes can happen.
Well, and also it takes away those so frequently embarrassing social corrections. When out there in public, oh, no, honey, we don't do that, that's inappropriate. And you say that to a child in their teens or young adult. It can be so shaming, because they want to feel socially competent, and having these tools to discuss it ahead of time, and the child goes out there boldly, having set their priorities and their strategy for how to engage the public. And then their parent can come in as a support person instead of the person who's in charge and taking those opportunities away from their child. We could easily talk about this for another couple hours, Leslie.
And sometimes I do.
But I want people to know where they can go online to get this for themselves. They have the access to the app if they want it, What's the name of the website they can go to get this curriculum?
Okay, the website from the producer, the publisher of the video and distributor of the video is www.stanfield.com, STANFIELD.com. And they'll find not only circles in all of its different iterations, but other very useful and enjoyable sex education materials developed for people with intellectual limitations. I'd like to also invite anybody who's listening to be a subscriber to my free quarterly newsletter called The Facts of Life Plus. And to do that, you just go to my website, which is www.lesliewalker-hirsch.com, and click on the purple sign up button. And then you fill out a very quick form and you'll be on my list. People like to put their first names. They want a little bit of anonymity. You know, I do consulting on Skype sometimes, and I thought that many people would want to consult on Skype, but most people prefer the phone so that I don't have to be face-to-face talking about a sexual issue with them. It's kind of funny, but at any rate, it's okay with me either way. I also, on my website, I have my book called The Facts of Life and More, Sexuality and Intimacy for People with Intellectual Disabilities. And I'm proud to say it won the 2007 Exceptional Parent Magazine Award for the best special education publication for that year. So I'm happy to be a part of that. I look forward to seeing this come up on the podcast networks, and I'm thrilled to have talked with you and your listeners.
It's an absolute thrill. This is such a dynamite topic. The work you're doing is exciting, and I will be happily shouting from the rooftops so parents can get access to this, and I'll probably be one of them, because this is a topic that's coming up in my own household, and my boys need a lot of guidance with. So consider me a fan, and very soon.
Fan circle? What circle is the fan circle, Brian?
The fan circle. Oh, that's the stranger circle. No, it's out there, and that's okay. So Leslie Walker-Hirsch, thank you so much again for coming on. I'm going to put all the links that you mentioned in the notes so people can easily click on them and get what they need and get access to you. Thank you again for being on the show.
My pleasure. You are a treasure yourself, Brian. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, bless you. And everybody, thanks for watching, listening, however you're accessing this. Make sure you follow up with Leslie. She's got so much to offer. If you want to follow up with me, just go to my website, which is unstoppableadhd.com, and reach out to me, and I'll happily connect with you there. Have an awesome day, week, month, life, and we will catch you on the next episode.
So long.